The Night on Cemetery Hill. Western fiction tale by Daniel Bellei. Narrated by Natural Reader. The late October season of colorful falling leaves now landscape the countryside as much seen present upon the town of Devil Rock Ridge, especially the town cemetery above the hill that gives the appearance of an autumn-haunted tone. In fact, the graveyard is much larger than the town itself. Obviously, from the many daily killing sprees that goes on in a violently harsh community as it has been known for years. Many claim that the cemetery is plagued with demon spirits and haunting exploits. Numerous strange tales have been told of its dead dwellers that embark upon in the night in their apparitions. Why not? The cemetery is basically made of foregone killers, murderers, all sorts of outlaws and low-life scums, not to mention lawmen and victims whom were not so lucky among these sorts of evil men. The main grave digger, Tim Patton, better known as the Missouri Kid, knows the criminal life would do to a man and the short lifespan it will bring. Timothy fears someday his fate will be like them he has buried. His endless strenuous job is like retaliation for all the wrongdoings in his own life as an outlaw. Like his longtime friend and partner, Dan Boy the Kid. You can say that both young boys has paid the price. Tim Patton and Dan Boy Ponce are labeled as being the most wanted outlaws of the states of Missouri and Arkansas, which are sought out for the many robberies and violent crimes. They fled Missouri and had come far to take refuge in this town, a place where they could lay low until things blow over. Especially for Dan Boy Ponce, who suggested Devil Rock Ridge, for he has an uncle who owns the Undertaker Parlor and Cemetery, and it was his uncle that gave him and Tim Patton their jobs. Dan Boy lives and works with his uncle at the Undertaker Parlor, and Timothy Patton lives in a shack on the cemetery property and is the main grave digger. On some occasions Dan Boy would help Missouri with the grave digging when the number death's heavy. Also, Dan Boy has referred Tim Patton as being called Missouri for short, a nickname Dan Boy had given him. After a long day of hard strenuous work, the Missouri Kid was dead to the world. Putting it in other words, he was sound asleep inside his shack on Cemetery Hill on this bitter blustery night upon a full moon. Unaware to Tim, a lightning storm was heading fast and wasn't long when the clouds rolled in. The black skies has thus darkened the cemetery's landscape. The full moon was still visible when occasionally it comes into view through the dark clouds. Then it happened. There came the heavy wind that kept the rain from forming with very loud thunder and masses of intense lightning. The burning odor of the powerful flashes of lightning was felt. The ear-splitting thunder and the sheet lightning was enough to awaken Missouri from his bed. Missouri quickly looked out his window and saw how the lightnings were hitting so close to the ground. Suddenly his door popped open from the tensed wind. Missouri quickly headed to the door and physically pushed it to close. He manages to push the large latch down to enforce it to lock. Unexpectedly, a dozen intense flashes of lightning struck the ground among the many graves, causing a thick haze of gray smoke that has layered most of the graveyard. Moments later, Missouri saw a figure from the smoky landscape heading in his direction. Patton tries to refocus his eye to make out the figure that was walking slow. To him it looked like a fellow pacing in a drunken fashion with his arms spread out. It was a human. It had soon revealed to him it was a dead person, one that has been dead for a long time. As for the person's body, it was quite decayed. Not more than a minute had gone past when there were more dead corpses that now surfaced through the heavy mist. Yet, more and more of the dead were coming towards Missouri. It did not take long for Tim to figure that they have come out of their graves. Zombies. The abnormal dilemma was alarming for the Missouri Kid. In fact, it was to the point that his own life is at a dangerous factor. The zombies are heading in his direction and undoubtedly he was food for them. Missouri sees his rifle and pistols from his room and prepare to take action against the walking dead. The hungry corpses were not able to get through the locked door of the shack, but they are able to smash the glass and get in through the two windows. Missouri kept on shooting, but Missouri was unaware that if he had aimed for the head he would able to drop them quick. Missouri was running out of ammunition fast, and in his panic he pushed the door open to the joining room, which was the stable and workshop that his horse, buck wagon, and tools were. The only thing he found useful as a weapon was a shovel. There were too many of them hungry creatures, and he was eventually overtaken by the many flesh eaters. The undead fed on his flesh as he tried to struggle and seek to break free. There were so many of them that had piled on top of him where they ripped his insides apart as well as his body organs torn out of him. Tim Patton was now deceased and was dead meat for even more zombies to feast on. As soon as they finished their supper, the zombies follow the other mass of their kind down to the lower ridge of the town of Devil Rock Ridge. Obviously it became a catastrophe and a defeat for the whole community. Many took to weapons against the zombies. The others, whom were not armed, were easy targets for the Walking Dead. At the Undertaker parlor, the elderly Undertaker and his young nephew, Dan Boy Ponce, were awakened by the loud violent incident that is taking place outside their windows. As the two looked out, they saw the mind-boggling events of zombies attacking the town. The elderly Undertaker looked at his nephew and then said to him in an troubled manner, "I had felt it and knew for some time there would be a curse from the heavens above. It was a matter of time when God would be angered and would cast a deadly plague on the evilness of this town. Yet, it is happening now. This town and its inhabitants will be destroyed. We all will be wiped out." Dan Boy responded to his uncle, "I'm not going to stand around and let them zombies take us. I will kill every one of them, even if they might take me down. I am not going to have them bastards make it easy for us." The elderly Undertaker replied, "Son, there are too many of them, you would not have much of a chance. You may get a good number of them zombies, but our fate would eventually come to pass. Most likely your good friend, Missouri, may be already the first victim to be their food chain, since those undead had originally come from their graves on Cemetery Hill. I am sure your friend fought well, but with so many he have to fight, he is perchance already devoured by them creatures. However, you are young and you have a lot of willpower, but if you are going to take to killing, you need to aim for the forehead. This is the only way to kill them creatures off. Like I said, they must be shot through the forehead to end their movement. I suggest telling others how to kill them when you are out there. I am an old man, but you have a better chance to prolong your own doom." Dan Boy the Kid hurried and grabbed what he needed for weapons. He then ventured out into the street to join others in their battle against the zombies. Most of the time he and others stayed in their groups to better defend themselves upon the deadly creatures. However, it did not last long, as the assembling followers were slowly losing their lives. Like his uncle had said to him, there were too many of them creatures. Many of his town comrades were already overtaken. This also included the unfavorable characters he knew. Soon enough, Dan Boy was forced to defend for himself on his own. Running and shooting from one location to the another along the street was getting Dan Boy utterly drained. In a hidden dark alley, Dan Boy had took time out to catch his breath and to reload his different weapons that include a shotgun. He quickly noticed in the dark that there appears a figure stumbling towards him from the other end of the dark alley. Dan Boy wasn't sure if it was a zombie or one hurt fellow that was escaping from the creatures. Nonetheless, Dan Boy was not going to take chances. He quickly pointed his shotgun toward the dark figure and waited, at least until he is able to see who he is dealing with. As the figure got closer, Dan Boy quickly recognized the person. It was his most hated adversary, the corrupted town sheriff, Pat McMillian. Dan Boy noticed that the wicked sheriff has been badly bitten and nearly trying to stay alive. As soon as the sheriff knowledge who was the man with a shotgun pointed in his direction, he quickly shouted out, "I be damn. It's you, Dan Boy. I suggest you put that fucking shotgun out of my face. You bastard, why do you think that you should live and the rest of us will perish? I always hated you, Dan Boy. If it was not your Undertaker being your uncle, I would have you killed off a long time ago. Now it does not matter anymore, we're doomed and you are going to be too when I finish you off." Dan Boy looked weak and exhausted from all the extreme conflicts of the zombies' confrontations. He was not in shape in taking in more problems. He quickly responded back at the sheriff, "You're in an odd predicament to say you're going to finish me off. If you not notice, I am the one with the shotgun pointing it at you. And if you somehow manage to do so, killing me would not accomplish nothing, you asshole. You need to save your energy to help us overtake these fucking zombies. There are not many of us left, and if you have any score to settle with me, then we can exchange our differences afterwards, that if any one of us is still alive." Sheriff Pat McMillian replied, "Perhaps you are right, you fucking prick. I can wait. Maybe I might get lucky that these damn zombies would devour you and save me the trouble." Dan Boy Ponce began to slowly lower his weapon on his opponent, being that fact the corrupted sheriff was not the best shape to do any harm on him. The sheriff started to walk slowly past Dan Boy to continue to the other end of the alley. Dan Boy decided then to continue finishing reloading the rest of his weapons. That was a really big mistake on Dan Boy's thinking. Without any notice, the evil sheriff quickly stopped in his tracks. He had reached for his gun in his holster and rapidly turned to fire 3 shots at Dan Boy. 2 out of 3 slugs hit the target, plugging Dan Boy in his chest and lower ribs, sending him sliding down against the side of the building. One of the bullets that had exited out his back had squirt blood upon the wall as he went downwards. Danboy was bleeding badly, even blood was saturating fast out of his lips, yet he was still hanging on. The sheriff replied, "Sorry kid, I lied. I'll just leave you here, and when the zombies come they will finish you off while they feed themselves on your fresh carcass." What the crooked sheriff didn't know was that the noise of the gun firing had alerted the undead. It had drove the creatures around the corner of the alley entrance where they waited. Pat McMillian didn't have a chance. The zombies promptly tackled Sheriff Pat McMillian to the ground where they feast on his body until they were filled of hunger. Meanwhile, Danboy was on the verge of death, and he had struggled hard by defending himself from the zombies whom saw him as easy target and fresh meat. Although they were still down the alley, feeding on the sheriff, soon enough they were heading towards him to feast on his gunshot body. Danboy fired his weapon in his most wounded condition to slow the creatures down. He manages to get a few of them and was able to stagger along the streets in his appalling ailment. As Danboy went further, he came upon someone in the distance that he almost sure he had knew. It was not until the figure's face turned briefly sideways when Danboy confirmed his acknowledge. It was his partner and close friend. It was Missouri, Tim Patton to be factually correct. Slowly, in a staggering manner, Danboy worked his way up to him and said, "It's me, Danboy. For some reason I figure you would be dead by now." As soon as Tim Patton turned around, Danboy quickly discovered that his friend's body was in shreds and wasted, exhibiting his body parts and matters either hanging out, or eaten away. Danboy Ponce realized that the Missouri he once knew is a walking vegetable whom has a hunger for fresh meat, and Danboy was to be his next meal. By now Danboy Ponce was too weak and near death. Missouri and a few other zombies had rushed in and constrained Danboy the Kid to the ground, where they began feasting upon his flesh to the goal of where they had satisfied their appetites. Danboy Ponce finally is part of the countless numbers of the living dead that now staggers with others upon the streets, at least through the rest of that night and into the next day around noon. By morning the whole town was extinguished of its townspeople, even many of the buildings were burned to the ground from the massive sheet of lightning of the night before. By midday the curse was lifted by the heavens above, and all zombies were set on fire and obliterated from the sun rays that the heavens had charged. Devil Rock Ridge became a desolate and fearful ghost town of ruins. The buildings were now crumbled down, and no man would venture in the area for fear of the old curse that inhabited it. The End. Western fiction tale by Daniel Bellei. Narrated by Natural Reader.